I've hiked most of my life. Forests, mountains, deserts, swamps, you name it. Something about being out there alone, pushing through trees and terrain with nothing but a pack in my thoughts, always felt right. I didn't grow up in a city. I wasn't raised around crowds or noise or sidewalks. I grew up in a place where you learned early how to shoot, how to keep quiet, and how to listen. The kind of quiet that only comes when you're deep enough in the woods that cars, phones, and anything man-made just stops mattering. That's where I feel at home. I don't scare easy either. I've had black bears nose around my tent at midnight, coyotes howling close enough that I could smell them. Once had a bull moose come through camp like it was his bedroom. Most people freak out in those situations. But animals do what animals do. They make sense. But this one hike, this one night, it didn't make sense. It was early October, northern Idaho, near the Montana border. Not quite snow season, but the air had turned sharp. You could feel the cold bite through your shirt after sunset. I had planned a solo route off a Forest Service trail, away from the popular hiking spots. I wanted to follow a ridgeline down toward a creek I'd marked on my map. It was about 3 days out, and I packed for 5 just in case. Basic gear, food sealed tight, heavy tarp, my old reliable 12-gauge pump action. Not because I expected trouble, but because you don't go that far out without being ready for it. First 2 days were easy, quiet. Even the birds seemed half asleep. I saw maybe 1 deer at a distance, some rabbits. No people, no boot prints, no wrappers, just long walks, cracking pine needles underfoot, and the sound of water somewhere always nearby. On the 3rd day, I set up camp on a flattened patch maybe 20 yards from the creek. A natural clearing, but not too open. Trees all around, dense enough for cover, but not so thick I couldn't move quickly if I needed to. I made a small fire ring out of stones, warmed up some freeze-dried beef stew, and drank creek water I boiled earlier. Normal routine. I stretched out under the tarp, leaned back with my shotgun propped beside me, and watched the last bit of sunlight filter through the trees until it all went black. I must have fallen asleep around 9. Then I heard it. That slow, steady breath. Not my own. I opened my eyes instantly. Years of hunting, tracking, and sleeping light in the woods had trained my body to snap awake like a switch being thrown. My ears caught the sound before my eyes adjusted. It was close, very close. Not sniffing, not rustling, breathing, heavy, deliberate. It wasn't panting. It wasn't winded. It was paced, slow. Like whatever it was knew exactly where it was and wasn't afraid of anything. It was just outside the tarp. I laid still, heartbeat slamming in my chest. My hand eased toward the shotgun. Slowly. I didn't want to jolt or make noise. Just slide my fingers over the stock and bring it into my lap without a sound. The breathing didn't change. It was deep, chesty, lower than any human breath I'd heard. Not wheezing, no growls or grunts, just clear, strong air moving in and out, like a massive set of lungs was sitting there in the dark, right on the other side of the fabric. It took everything in me not to flick on my flashlight or sit up. My gut told me not to make a silhouette, not to make sudden noise. Just listen, be ready. Then I racked the shotgun. There is absolutely nothing that transcends all languages like the sound of a pump-action shotgun being loaded. It's not just noise, it's a statement, a line in the sand, a threat, a warning. Every creature that's ever heard that sound knows what it means, even if they've never seen a gun. And the moment that CHKCHK echoed out into the night, the breathing stopped. Not slowed, stopped. I held still, shotgun ready, finger not on the trigger yet but near it. No footsteps, no branches breaking, no running, just silence. Then nothing, total absolute nothing. No birds, no owls, no frogs. Even the creek sounded quieter. I sat in that silence for what felt like forever. My legs started to cramp. My jaw was tight. I waited. 2 minutes. 3. Still nothing. I didn't sleep. I didn't lay down. I sat in the dark, cold wrapping around my shoulders, shotgun pointed toward where I'd heard the sound. The night dragged on. Hours passed. I checked my watch a few times when I dared move. Each time it felt like the hands barely moved. Sometime around 5, The birds started chirping again, like someone hit a switch and brought the forest back online. I waited until there was enough light to see clearly before I moved. I stepped out of the tarp slowly, scanning the area. The trees, the brush, the fire pit, the path leading to the creek. Nothing. No tracks, no disturbed dirt, no claw marks, no broken branches. Nothing looked touched, but I knew what I heard. That wasn't a dream. That wasn't wind. That wasn't some squirrel huffing around in the leaves. I did one last circle, checking the perimeter with slow, deliberate steps. Still nothing. The dirt was soft enough that anything heavy should have left something behind. A bear, an elk, even a person in boots. But there wasn't so much as a scuff. I packed fast. I didn't eat. I didn't even refill my water. I just shouldered my gear and headed back along the trail. I knew it'd take me longer going uphill, but I didn't care. I wanted miles between me and that spot. I walked hard for 10 hours straight, only stopping to piss. I didn't feel safe again until I was back in my truck. Doors locked, keys in the ignition. Even now, years later, I think about that sound. Not the shotgun, the breathing. There was weight in it. Massachusetts, like something too big to move quiet, but it had. Something that should have left signs, but didn't. And I've run that night through my head 100 times. Could it have been a bear? Maybe, but bears snort, huff, grunt, move heavy. That breathing was steady and smooth, too quiet in every way except how close it was. Person, out there in that cold, in that part of Idaho? Why? And barefoot? Because that's the only way they could have left no prints in that soft dirt. Then why just breathe? Why not speak? Why not approach the tent? None of it adds up. I've gone on hikes since. I still carry the same shotgun. I still sleep light. I still stretch out a tarp and breathe in the quiet. But I haven't camped in that spot again. I haven't even driven past it. And I'll never forget that night. How silence can scream. How breathing can speak louder than words. And how the sound of racking a shotgun is sometimes the only thing that reminds the world that you're not the prey. That moment, right there, in the dead middle of nowhere, was the first time I felt something different. Not fear of a bear. Not fear of being hunted. It was the fear of something watching, measuring, waiting, knowing that I had no idea what it was. And the only thing that saved me might have been a sound. One that didn't need translation. One that meant, try it and die. I've done solo hikes for years. I usually plan them in the fall, late enough in the season that the bugs are mostly gone, the leaves are turning, and most tourists have packed it in. I go for the solitude. I don't hike for the thrill or the social media pictures. I do it to get away from people, for real silence, for a reset. There's something about having no signal, no voices, just your boots hitting the dirt and the rustle of trees overhead. You can't fake it out there. This trip was supposed to be one of those resets. I had picked a place I hadn't been before. Middle of nowhere, Utah, just east of Capitol Reef, near a canyon system that barely made it into any guidebooks. I got the tip from an old topo map and some Bureau of Land Management notes online. The area was a mix of dry washes, slot canyons, and a few stretches of scrubby high desert. It wasn't beautiful in a postcard way, but it was empty, really empty. I parked at a pull-off about 4 hours from the nearest gas station. No signs, no markers, just faded tire ruts and an old cattle fence rusting in place. I loaded my pack with food, water, tarp, and my .357, my go-to for wilderness hikes. Not because I expected anything, but I've run into aggressive coyotes and one too curious mountain lion in the past. You learn to be prepared, not paranoid. I started hiking east into the canyons. The first day was easy, about 10 miles through some flat open terrain, then down into a dry riverbed. I saw some mule deer scat and jackrabbit tracks. The air was dry and the sun kept things warm even though the breeze had some bite. I didn't see another soul. That first night, I camped in the bend of the canyon. Tarp strung between two rock outcroppings, fire pit dug shallow into the sand. Ate jerky, hydrated, laid back and watched the stars. Clean sleep, no sounds except for one owl and a breeze that faded around midnight. Second day, I hiked deeper into the system. That's when the terrain started to get narrow. I had to squeeze between some tight slot walls and scramble down one dry fall. The kind of place where GPS starts to lag and even compasses can go weird with all the mineral buildup. But I kept track. I left rock markers, took photos on my phone to retrace later if needed. Sometime in the afternoon, maybe around 3, I saw something that didn't sit right. I was climbing out of a narrow slot when I noticed a scuffed area on the sandstone ledge above me. Looked like a boot mark, faint, a heel and some pressure indentations. I crouched and checked it out. Not fresh, but not ancient either. Could have been a few days old. Not uncommon. Someone could have been hiking through before me. But about 30 feet further, on another flat rock, I found what looked like a handprint. Palm down, big, spread fingers, almost like someone had stumbled forward and braced themselves. No blood, no drag marks, nothing violent. Just odd. It made the hairs go up on my neck. I moved on. That night I camped just above a box canyon. I didn't feel good about camping in the box. No quick way out if something went wrong. I chose a small rise near some junipers, far enough from the slot walls that I had some visibility. It was colder that night. I bundled in tight, loaded my pistol, and kept it near my chest as I dozed off. Sometime around midnight, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. No sound, no wind, dead still. I stayed on my back, eyes open, listening. Then I saw the silhouette. Up on the ridge, maybe 40 yards from me, outlined against the stars and scrub. A shape, upright, still, wide at the shoulders. I didn't move. I blinked, checked if I was seeing shadows. But no, it was there, just standing. It didn't move for what felt like minutes. Finally, I slowly reached for my flashlight, flicked it on toward the figure. Gone, just gone, like it had dropped or stepped back. I scanned the ridge with the light. Nothing, no rocks tumbling, no footsteps, nothing broken. The next few hours I didn't sleep, just waited for the sun. When light finally came, I packed up and scanned the ridge area. No footprints, not even disturbed soil, but something had stood there. I know it. I know the difference between a trick of the eyes and a body. Still, I pushed on, hiked down into the next slot and started moving west, aiming to loop back in a broad arc toward my starting point. Late that day, I came across something else. A jacket, faded red, dirty, tucked under an overhang like someone had intentionally stashed it. There was a small pack nearby, canvas, old style. It had a broken zipper and some granola bar wrappers inside. No name, no ID. The weirdest part? The pack was warm, not hot, but like it had absorbed body heat, like someone had dropped it maybe an hour or two before. I scanned the area again. No prints, no fresh markings. That's when the unease stopped being background noise and started turning into something tight in my chest. I moved faster after that. Didn't want to camp again. But with the sun going down, I didn't have a choice. I picked a wide open spot, flat enough for my tarp, but with full 360-degree view. No ridges, no overhangs, nothing that could hide something taller than a cactus. I didn't eat, didn't build a fire, just laid still with my pistol in hand, safety off, eyes half closed but fully awake. And then came the moment I'll never forget. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps, dry, light ones, like someone moving barefoot over sandstone. They circled, not fast, not stealthy, just a slow arc around my camp. Never closer than 20 feet. I kept still. Then, out of the corner of my eye, movement. Someone stepped into view, just within the edge of moonlight. It was a man, gaunt, shirtless, dust-caked skin, barefoot. He looked like someone who had been living out here for weeks or months. Long hair matted back. And as I watched him, he did the one thing that made my stomach drop. He looked right at me and gave that hand motion. You know the one. The open hand twist. Fingers spread. A slow counterclockwise swirl like he was asking me, "What the fuck, dude?" Like I was the one who didn't make sense. He didn't talk. He didn't run. He just tilted his head slightly and did that motion again. Slower, deliberate, like I was the intruder. I raised the pistol and sat up. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to make it clear I wasn't unarmed. He didn't flinch. He just took a step back into the dark, turned, and walked off into the brush like it was a casual stroll. I didn't chase. I didn't shoot. I waited until morning. No trace of him. No pack. No trail. Nothing. I hiked nonstop for the next 12 hours until I reached my truck. My legs were screaming. My water was almost out, but I didn't care. I locked the doors, started the engine, and didn't stop driving until I hit the town limits. Took a week before I could sleep fully again. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was a survivalist, maybe mentally unstable, maybe lost. But the gear, the stash jacket, the warm pack, the silent movement, none of it added up. I think he lived out there, for real, off-grid, watching, waiting. Maybe I was the first one he'd seen in months. Maybe I stepped into his territory. But that look on his face when he made that hand gesture, that open-palmed, "What the fuck, dude?" motion, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was mocking, like he was the one who belonged out there, and I was the idiot, like I'd broken some rule I didn't even know existed. I've hiked since, but I stay closer to marked trails now. I camp in sight of rivers or landmarks. I don't push deep into places with no names, because out there, somewhere in the Red Rock Canyons of southern Utah, there's a man who doesn't want company, and if you wander too far off trail, he might just show up and look at you like you're the crazy one. That hand motion still haunts me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even scared. It was like I'd interrupted something, like I was a loud, clumsy outsider in a place that wasn't mine. I'll never forget that motion, that question. What the fuck, dude? And to this day, I still don't have an answer. I wasn't new to hiking. I'd done most of the usual well-marked trails in the national parks and even a few light backcountry ones over the years, but I wasn't some survivalist or hardcore outdoorsman. I just liked getting away from the city. The noise, the people, the deadlines, the parking, the constant hum of other lives around mine. It wore me down. That's why I started planning longer trips into less popular spots. Nothing too extreme, but far enough out where I wouldn't see more than a few people a day, or maybe none at all. The point was the quiet. The raw kind of quiet you only find when you've hiked long enough that your ears ring from the lack of it. That kind of silence is addicting. This trip was in southern England. I was visiting for work, and I had an open weekend, so I packed light and looked for a quiet trail. After some digging online and reading old forum posts, I picked a lesser-known walking route through the countryside. It wasn't a national trail, just a mix of permissive paths and old bridleways that wound through woods, fields, and a few old hedgerows. The route had minimal signage and wasn't part of any popular walking tour, which I liked. It was autumn, late September. The air had that kind of clean, cool crispness to it. Days were still long enough for good walking, but the nights were already getting cold. I had a small bivvy tent, a wool blanket, thermal gear, a good torch, and a small pack with food and water. The plan was to spend 2 nights out and loop back the third morning. Nothing difficult. The first day was perfect. Flat paths, quiet trails, some farmland off in the distance, and thick woods lining the ridges. I didn't see a single person all day. A few pheasants darted off into the bushes when I passed, and I spotted a fox in the distance near a crumbling stone wall. That night, I pitched my bivvy under an old oak tree next to a field of tall grass. It was quiet, really quiet. You don't notice how much noise your life has until it's gone. No phones, no cars, no TV. Just the wind brushing the leaves and the occasional rustle in the underbrush. Sometime after I'd eaten and zipped myself into the bivvy, I started hearing breathing. First, I thought it was mine. I was lying still, belly up, arms crossed over my chest, and my breath was shallow from the cold. But this was different. It wasn't from inside my sleeping bag. It was outside, close, a slow, rasping inhale and exhale, like someone trying to keep their breathing quiet, but failing. I didn't move. My brain tried to rationalize it. Badger? Fox? Hedgehog? But it sounded too loud, too deliberate. There was rhythm to it. Deep in-breath, pause, out-breath, almost like someone lying next to me on the grass and breathing slowly. It went on for minutes. I told myself it had to be something small, just close. Something breathing loud for its size, but still harmless. Maybe even, I don't know, a hedgehog? I'd heard someone say they make weird noises, snorting, chuffing, but this wasn't quite that. This was slower, heavier. I finally sat up and unzipped the bivvy halfway, shined my torch toward the sound. Nothing, just grass, the tree trunk, some dew on the leaves. But the second I moved, the sound stopped, gone. No rustle of something running away, no crack of twigs, just stopped. I lay back down and didn't sleep much after that. Kept the flashlight in one hand and listened. The sound never came back. In the morning, I looked around. No tracks, no dug-up soil, nothing that suggested an animal had been nearby. I tried not to think too much of it. Maybe it had been a hedgehog. Maybe it wasn't. I kept walking. The second day's trail led deeper into woods, older ones, thicker. The kind with dark undergrowth and moss-covered roots. The path narrowed until it was barely more than a deer trail. Branches pulled at my jacket. Dead leaves muffled my steps. It was quiet again. Not peaceful quiet, just still. That afternoon, I started noticing something else. Little holes in the ground, dugout patches. Not big enough for badger dens, not neat enough for rabbit warrens. Just scattered, random, maybe 4 inches wide, 6 inches deep, like something had rooted around. I saw maybe a dozen in one area. Some of them looked fresh, still damp soil, no paw prints, no claw marks. Later, I passed what looked like an old animal carcass. Bits of fur stuck to brambles, ribs picked clean. Could have been a fox or even a cat. I didn't stop to inspect it. That night, I made camp in a small hollow surrounded by brush. No tent, just the bivvy again under the low-hanging branches. I ate, drank, stretched, and settled in early. The cold was sharper now. Damp, got into the bones. I fell asleep with my face half covered by the blanket. Then the breathing came back. Same sound, same slow rhythm. I froze. It was closer this time, directly next to the bivvy, inches away. I could hear it just outside the thin nylon wall of the bag. One breath at a time. Inhale, hold, exhale. I didn't dare move. The breath sounded like a man's, like someone in their 40s, heavyset maybe, labored but controlled, as if they were trying to listen through their own breathing, trying to stay quiet but not managing it. My mind raced. If it was an animal, it would have run by now. If it was a person, why were they lying next to me on the ground? I waited, heart hammering, eyes wide. Then I heard movement, just the softest shift, like knees on dirt. Someone adjusting their weight. Still no footsteps, still no voice, just that breathing. And then, slowly, I felt the weight press against the side of the bivvy. Just a little, a slight dip in the fabric, as if someone was leaning gently on it with a hand or a knee. Enough to feel, enough to know it was real. I stayed still. Every nerve in my body was screaming. The breathing paused. I didn't know what to do. Then a twig snapped somewhere further off. Just a crack. The pressure disappeared. The breathing stopped, and it was gone. I lay there until sunrise. When I crawled out, the grass around me was flattened in a wide arc. Something had been kneeling or sitting there. No shoes, just smooth indents, like bare knees. I didn't pack. I just left, grabbed my gear in a bundle and walked fast. The trail was barely visible, but I didn't care. I just wanted out. I hiked all day, didn't stop for lunch, didn't look at the map, just moved. Around dusk, I reached a stone wall that marked the edge of a sheep pasture. Beyond it, I could see a farmhouse about a mile away. I didn't care if I was trespassing. I climbed the wall and followed the ridge toward the house. Before I got there, I found something else. An old, rusted iron trap. Not set, but lying near a rotted log. Looked like a jaw trap. Illegal these days, probably from a decade ago or more. Next to it, a set of sticks leaned up against a tree in a kind of pyramid. Looked like nothing. Could have been some bored kid's fort. Could have been nothing. I didn't stop to guess. I made it to the farmhouse. Knocked. No one answered. I camped in their sheep barn that night. Dry hay, a closed roof, for walls. Best sleep of the trip. Next morning, I followed the gravel road to the main road and hitched a ride into town. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not until now. Looking back, maybe it was just an animal. Maybe a big one. Maybe a hedgehog. I googled it later. Hedgehogs do breathe weirdly. Snorting, loud, almost human sometimes. But hedgehogs don't press their weight against your bivvy. They don't breathe in sync with your own breathing. They don't move on their knees and leave no prints. I don't know what it was, but every now and then, when I lie in bed late at night, I hear that same breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone just outside the wall, like they're waiting. I don't hike alone anymore. I've spent most of my adult life in the woods, hunting, hiking, camping alone for weeks at a time. It's not just a hobby for me, it's what I look forward to the most every year. I'm not a thrill seeker or a survivalist. I'm just a quiet guy who prefers the solitude of tall trees and wind over the sound of traffic or people talking. There's a comfort in being far away from it all, especially when you know how to take care of yourself out there. This happened 2 years ago during a solo hiking trip in the Bitterroot Mountains in Montana. It was a stretch of public land I knew well, a trail I had taken several times before. But this trip wasn't about the trail. I planned to leave it. My goal was to bushwhack off into a stretch of forest I had marked on my maps years ago but had never taken the time to explore. The area was remote. No signs of other hikers, no campsites, no human activity. Just forest, slope, and silence. I packed in deep. Took 3 days to get to the ridge where I planned to set up a base camp. The hike in was uneventful. I saw a few elk, a black bear off in the distance, some fresh deer scat, the usual signs of healthy wildlife. The weather was fair, a bit windy at times, but the skies held. Nights got cold, but nothing I wasn't prepared for. By the third night, I had my camp set up just below the crest of a ridge with a thick stand of pine behind me and a small open clearing in front. My tent was a 2-person canvas setup I use for extended trips. Sturdy, reliable. I always carry a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun with slugs and buckshot. Not because I expect trouble, but because being prepared is just part of it. I've had to scare off a few bears before. Loud noises usually do the trick. That evening was just like the others. I boiled some water, ate a packet of chili mac, and watched the last of the sun slide behind the trees. As usual, I stashed all my scented gear, food, trash, anything that might attract animals. About 30 yards from camp, suspended from a tree branch, I did a quick check around the tent perimeter before crawling in and zipping up for the night. I remember dozing off to the wind pushing through the trees. No animal calls, no bugs, no night birds. That wasn't unusual at this elevation and time of year. Sometimes it gets so quiet you feel like the whole forest is holding its breath. I don't know exactly what time it was when I woke up, but it was deep into the night, pitch black, no moonlight. I didn't wake up from a dream, and there wasn't any sound inside the tent that stirred me. I just woke up, my eyes opened, the kind of wake up that doesn't feel like a slow crawl from sleep, but instant awareness. Like my brain knew something was wrong before I was even fully conscious. And that's when I heard it. Breathing. Not snuffling, not huffing, not animal grunts or rustling. Just heavy, steady breathing. It wasn't fast like someone running. It wasn't ragged or panicked. It was deep, slow, and intense. Like something was deliberately taking in huge amounts of air through a large set of lungs and pushing it back out through a big open mouth. It was close. Not echoing through the woods, not distant. It was right outside my tent, and it was all I could hear. No wind, no insects, no movement in the trees, just that breathing, heavy, steady, unnatural in how it didn't come with any footsteps, no crunching twigs or shifting dirt, no sound of sniffing, just breathing. My body locked up for a second. I've been in close calls with bears before. Had one push against my tent once while smelling food I hadn't hung right. But this wasn't the same. That bear had made noise, snorting, grunting, huffing as it walked around. This thing wasn't moving. It wasn't investigating. It was just breathing, right there. I reached slowly to my right, feeling around in the dark for the shotgun. I always keep it beside me at night, my fingers wrapped around the grip. I pulled it onto my chest and quietly racked a shell into the chamber. The sound of the pump seemed too loud, like it echoed across the ridge. But the breathing didn't change. No flinch, no pause. It just kept going. I pointed the barrel toward the wall of the tent where the sound was coming from. I didn't yell or make a noise. I didn't want to startle whatever it was. I just lay there, eyes wide open, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I waited. The breathing kept going, not speeding up, not slowing down, just deep in and out over and over, like it was standing still, facing the tent. I don't know how long I held the shotgun steady like that. Could have been a few minutes, but it felt like an hour. My muscles started to ache. I kept waiting for some other sign, movement, a paw pressing on the tent, a sniff, something. But all I got was that sound, that deep, chest-filling, powerful breathing. Then, without warning, it stopped. No fading out, no walking away, just gone. Cut off in the middle of an exhale like someone hit a switch. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a full minute, just listening. The silence that followed felt louder than the breathing had been. It was so still I could hear the blood in my ears. My hand tightened around the shotgun. I thought maybe it had crouched down or backed away quietly, but that didn't make sense. Nothing that big could move without making some noise. And it was big. You could feel it. You don't breathe like that unless you've got the size to push serious air. I stayed like that until dawn. I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes. I just kept pointing the shotgun, listening, waiting. The silence never broke. No footsteps, no branches cracking, no night animals. It was like the forest just held its breath with me. When the light started to seep in through the thin fabric of the tent, I slowly sat up. I waited until I could really see not just shapes before I unzipped the flap and stepped out with the gun up. I expected tracks, maybe disturbed dirt, paw prints, some sign that something had been there. But the ground was untouched. The pine needles under and around the tent looked exactly the same. No impressions, no trail leading away. The small clearing was undisturbed. I checked my food bag. Still hanging, still sealed. Nothing moved. No signs of claw marks or chewing. I circled the area, looking for any broken branches, fur, scat, anything. But it was clean. No damage, no smells, no physical sign that anything had been in the area at all. I went farther out, maybe 50 yards in every direction. Still nothing. Even looked for human prints, just in case some idiot had wandered out there. But there were no signs of boots, no cigarette butts, no trash, no gear, nothing. That was almost worse than finding prints. I packed my gear as fast as I ever have. My whole body was wired, every sense turned up to the highest setting. The silence stayed with me. The birds didn't come back. No squirrels, no chipmunks. It was like something had passed through that didn't belong and everything else went into hiding. I hiked all the way back to the main trail that day. No breaks, no food stops, just me, the shotgun, and a growing sense that something had watched me the night before and left nothing behind. For weeks after I got home, I played that sound over and over in my head. That breathing. I tried to compare it to animals I knew. Elk? No, their breathing's lighter. Bears? A grizzly can breathe hard, but they move around. They snort and stomp and scratch. This wasn't that. Mountain lion? I've seen one up close. They're silent, but they don't breathe like that. They hiss, growl, purr. This wasn't feline. This wasn't any animal sound I recognized. It was human-like, but not quite. Bigger, fuller, stronger. Some people think I just imagined it. Sleep paralysis, maybe. A dream. But I was awake. I know I was. I had the shotgun in my hands. I felt the cold steel, the weight, the tension in my muscles. I was not dreaming. It's been 2 years. I still go into the woods. Still hunt. Still camp. But I haven't been back to that ridge. I've marked it off on my maps. I don't tell anyone where it is. I don't even look at it. I don't know what came that night. I don't know what stood outside my tent, breathing loud enough to wake me from a dead sleep, and then left without a trace. But I know it was real. I know it was big, and I know it knew I was inside. Maybe it was just passing through. Maybe I was in its way. Whatever it was, it didn't try to get in. It didn't attack. It just stood there and breathed. But that was enough. I've chased bears out of camps, faced down coyotes, bobcats, even had a run-in with a moose once. None of them ever made me feel like that night did. Like something was watching me from a place I didn't understand. Like I was completely exposed, even inside a zipped-up tent with a loaded shotgun. That was the first time I've ever felt hunted. And the worst part is, I never even saw it. I've always liked solo hiking, the quiet, the focus, the feeling of being completely removed from everything, including people. I like groups too sometimes, but there's something about being out in the wild on your own that resets your head in a way nothing else really can. My story starts somewhere on the Appalachian Trail. I had taken a few weeks off work to do a long stretch solo, stringing up my hammock each night in different parts of the forest. I'd usually veer off the main trail a little each evening. Nothing extreme, just far enough to be out of sight and earshot. I didn't like campsites. I liked finding flat patches between trees, places where I could set up quietly, eat something cold, read a little with a headlamp, then fall asleep to the sound of bugs and leaves rustling. It was probably my 5th or 6th night out when things started to feel off. I remember it pretty clearly. I had hiked a longer stretch that day, trying to beat an incoming patch of rain. It never came, but the clouds lingered and made everything feel heavy and still. I found a decent spot in a pine grove just above a small ravine. Good view, decent trees spaced out enough for the hammock. It wasn't near any water source, which I usually tried to avoid at night anyway. Less traffic that way, both animal and human. I ate a peanut butter wrap, drank the last of my water, and just laid back, letting my hammock rock slowly with the breeze. I kept my pack hanging from a nearby branch, double-checked that I had my bear bag set and far enough away. Everything seemed normal. It was quiet, just distant wind sounds and some tree creaks. I fell asleep probably around 9 or 10. No fire, no noise, just me and the dark. That night, I was in that kind of half-dream state where your mind drifts, but your body isn't fully relaxed yet. I kept waking up and then drifting back down. Sometime in the early morning hours, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., I felt something strange. I didn't hear anything at first, no obvious noise, but I felt pressure. It's hard to explain unless you've slept in a hammock before, but you get used to the feeling of total suspension. If something shifts underneath, even a squirrel running under, you notice it. What I felt was different. It was like something big moved right under me, quietly. No clumsy steps, no rustling, just a slow and solid form moving directly beneath my back. It pressed up against the underside of the hammock, and it was tall enough that it actually lifted my feet for a moment. Just an inch or two, but enough that I woke up instantly. My legs had shifted like someone had nudged them. My first thought was that a person was under me. Maybe someone had found my camp and was messing around. But the movement didn't feel like a person crawling. It was too smooth, almost like the back of a large animal. Deer? That was the only thing I could come up with, though I'd never heard of a deer walking so close to a suspended hammock before. I laid still, every part of me frozen. My breathing went shallow. I didn't hear footsteps or snorts, just silence. Then it was gone. No crackling leaves, no obvious retreat. Whatever it was moved on. I didn't even unzip my hammock bug net to check. I just laid there, stiff as a board, for another hour or two. Eventually, light started to come through the trees. Only then did I swing my legs down and get out. There were no clear tracks under the hammock. The pine needles were packed pretty tight, but there were some faint depressions near one of the trees. Deep enough that I don't think it was a raccoon or anything small. Maybe a deer. That was the only rational answer. Still, it stayed with me. A few days later, I reached a highway crossing, hitched a ride into town, and stayed in a small hostel. My plan was to resupply, shower, and catch a flight for a bigger trip I'd planned for months. Hiking in Africa. Totally different world, different danger, different rules. The baboon incident happened during that trip. And let me just say, if the hammock thing unnerved me, the baboon rattled me down to the bone. The group hike in Africa was meant to be a break from solo hiking. I joined up with some friends, 8 of us total, most of us Americans. We were exploring a large gorge known for its dry riverbeds, thick brush, and steep canyon walls. It was supposed to be safe enough for small groups, but you were advised to take a local guide anyway. We had one, and he knew the area well, pointing out elephant dung, old leopard scat, signs of hyenas. He also warned us about baboons. We'd seen a few small troops earlier in the day. They usually just moved off when they saw us coming. But the big males, they're another story. We were moving single file along a narrow path when I felt it. That prickly sensation on the back of your neck, like something's watching you. I turned slowly. There it was, maybe 10 feet behind me, a huge male baboon, bigger than any I'd seen before, with a deep chest, long limbs, and sharp canines that were way more obvious than I wanted them to be. He wasn't moving, just staring. His eyes were locked on me. Then he took a step forward, slow but confident. I didn't run. Running from something like that just makes it worse. I also didn't yell. That was discouraged, too. But I did something that, in hindsight, saved me from a much worse situation. I took off my backpack and set it down in front of me. He was reaching for it. That's what he wanted. As soon as it was on the ground, he stepped up, grabbed it, and backed off a few meters. Then he sat down like a little kid with a toy and unzipped every pocket with careful little fingers. It would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. He found some granola bars and trail mix and started eating like it was a picnic. He didn't care that I was still watching him. He didn't rush, just sat there, licking his fingers, digging deeper into the bag. Then he left, backpack half emptied. He slung it awkwardly over one shoulder and wandered off into the trees. We kept moving after that, a little shaken but mostly in awe. Our guide said it was rare, but not unheard of. We thought it was over. It wasn't. About 15 minutes later, he came back. Same baboon, same slow walk, same dead-eyed stare. He didn't charge, just stalked us from behind. We threw rocks. Nothing. Someone sprayed some pepper spray in a wide arc to create a cloud between us and him. He sneezed, rubbed his eyes, and kept coming. Not fast, just persistent. This happened again, twice more. Each time he would get closer, back off, and then come back again. Eventually, we crossed into more open terrain, where we could see in all directions, and that seemed to break his interest. He vanished into the brush after that. We made it back to the trailhead by evening, shaken and missing some gear. My bag was later found a few hundred meters from where we first saw him. Torn, empty, half-soaked from a puddle. It was only later, lying in a small cabin bed back at the reserve camp, that I realized the worst part. That feeling of being watched. That was the same exact sensation I had back on the Appalachian Trail in the hammock. Whatever had passed under me that night, it didn't run, didn't act like prey. It moved like a predator, quiet, intentional, curious, and big enough to lift my legs as it passed under. Maybe it was a deer. That's what I told myself for a few nights. But after the baboon, I started thinking about how many things out there are smart. Smarter than we give them credit for. How many are watching, waiting, testing the edge of your comfort. I've gone back to hiking since. Still use a hammock sometimes. Still wander alone now and then. But I carry things differently now. Not just gear. Awareness. Respect for the things that walk without sound and look you dead in the eye like they've known you for years. And every time I feel a shift in the ground under my feet or hear a branch snap behind me, I remember the weight of that quiet step under the hammock and the cold stare of the baboon as he unzipped my life one pocket at a time. I haven't seen either again, but I think about them both more often than I'd like to admit.